Today we're going to go over guided pathways, pillar 1, which you probably are so tired of hearing, but we're going to go into diving in how it is that we are going to think methodically about changing curriculum when that time comes, right? Because a lot of the questions we're getting now is, how do I do it on my own? Okay, so that's what we're going to cover today. And so how do we begin? So one of the first things that we covered, and you may have seen this already, is that we created these guiding principles. These guiding principles are part of what is in the rubric, part of what you continue to see. Everything that we change in the curriculum is based off of this. And so we're going to cover these more thoroughly so that, again, we're providing you the resources that can help you figure out what are some of these courses that, I can choose from. And so starting off with general education, we always want to make sure that those are part of IAI, the Illinois Articulation Agreement. And if they're not, then there should be a justification as to why. We know that for some of the associate and applied science degrees, there are some math requirements that just are not, right? And that they have their justification for that. We also have recommended electives that are also not II, but should also be clearly marked as to why they are not, why they are or why they're not. We want to also start incorporating from day one one of the major courses. So students, if they're identifying chemistry as their major, if they are eligible, they should at least take a chemistry class to see if they like that, right? How often do we meet with a student and they've never taken a science course, but they want to go into pre-med? And so we want to make sure that they get started. And we also have a lot of transfer programs, whether they're transfer guides, partnerships, articulation agreements, that tell us, these are the courses that we want for that particular major. And so going off of what we already have in existence, those Form 13s, those programs, those transfer guides, it's a great way to start. Semester should always be as close as possible to at least 15 hours so that we can keep it within the 2-year requirement. However, we know that when students meet one-on-one with their advisors, that might not always be the case, right? They might have to be here part-time. They might be able to do one semester full-time, another one part-time. And also, we don't want students to go beyond the 60 hours. And that's because it eats up their financial aid when they do that. Also, time is money, right? The sooner they can transfer and start, whether it's their career or their major at a university, the sooner they can start being even more successful, right? We want them to get on with their lives. And also, we want to make sure that the semester, the gen eds are spread out within every semester evenly, but also within 3 semesters if possible. In most of the programs that we revised, it was a possibility, but sometimes it was not. The rationale as to why we want that is so that students can complete the GECC, the General Education Core. That GECC allows them to still earn a credential when they transfer. So even if they don't end up getting an associate's degree, at least they've met the core requirements for the general education. And these guiding principles were done with a lot of research in mind. We did conduct focus groups with students, and we consulted our coaches to make sure that we were on the right track. And a lot of best practices at other institutions who have instilled this successfully talk about these core requirements.
Jump in real quick. So just to make sure, can you go back to the last slide?
Yeah.
I want to make sure we sort of know our audience as well. We didn't get to do our sort of icebreaker piece.
Yeah.
So how many of you have either created or edited like a major, right, a math that we have in terms of, working on a math degree, a physics degree, a criminal justice degree? How many of you have sort of worked on that curriculum? Some of you have, some of you haven't. So again, what this is really getting into is, we've always been doing this, right? We've had to make and edit curriculum. That's something faculty have always been a part of. What Guided Pathways is doing is, again, trying to make sure that it becomes a very student-centered process in terms of we are meeting the students' needs, not just what is easiest or works best for our faculty. And that's where these came in. So there's a lot of stuff about gen eds we're going to get into just to make sure everyone understands, everyone knows. Like what are the sort of requirements? Some of those just come from the state. We don't have a say over those, but we just want to make it easy for us to understand as faculty, for students to understand, for advisors to understand. So making that communication clear. But this is sort of the stuff that Guided Pathways has added to that process, these guiding principles, to try and make it, again, based on the research, like Nellie said, of what's going to make these degrees best for students and help students finish more quickly, save money, but also get all the stuff they really need to move on. So I just sort of want to get a sense. So that's sort of where we're going with all this. Sorry.
And I'm glad you said that. One thing I really want to mention, because I just read this in an article, but it's very true. The goal is not to eliminate courses. It's really just to be more prescriptive on what we tell students to take so that they know, like, this is going to transfer. And again, there is also something to keep in mind, that the Associate in Applied Science degree, we could not change very much because that has different approval processes, right? There are programs that are very prescribed, but for the ones that are Associate in Arts, Associate in Science, generally have a little more wiggle room for a change, because as long as the integrity of the degree stays the same, that's what matters. So these are the 4 categories that we'll go in to more deep. The general education core, the core courses, the program electives, and the electives. These are the things that you see in that outline, right? That rubric, along with the actual outline that you complete when you're prescribing certain courses. So Sheldon will cover those more thoroughly. But starting off with the general education core, and this is what is prescribed by the state. We have the 3 communication courses, which are Rhetoric 1, Rhetoric 2, Speech, 3 Humanities, Fine Arts, 2 of one and 1 of the other, Mathematics, 1 mathematics course, but they are a very prescribed list, 1 physical science, 1 life science, one of them must have at least a lab, and 3 social behavioral sciences, 1 must be from at least a different discipline. The difference, if you notice, this is what the AA requires in their general education core. How it differs from the Associate in Science is that the Associate in Science is only 1 humanities, fine arts, 2 humanities, fine arts, 2 social behavioral sciences. And so Sheldon will break that down in a really nice table later on.
Yeah, so this is something somewhat newer to campus for those of you who've been here for a while, where it's, again, this sort of new, it's almost like a certificate where students can get this, and if you do it right, you can get this after like 3 semesters if the student's really focused, especially for AA degrees like Nellie was mentioning. It's possible that like a student could have all this, meet this, and then sort of decide, well, do I go on, do I finish this Associate in Arts degree for a 4th semester, or do I just leave here with this certificate and then move on and transfer to a school? And again, that's good for the student. They can sort of make that choice. And it's good for us because it still counts as them graduating from Triton if they get this. So that's one of the reasons we're sort of trying to make it happen for students when possible.
And this avoids a student having to do the university's general education core, which if you've seen, if they don't have this core, which is consistent across all of the 48 community colleges in Illinois, then they have them do their own, and it can be very confusing because it's not the same thing as what we require.
Yeah, so here are the general education requirements. So again, if you, I know those of you have it, it's probably always working in the AS degree, the Associate of Science. But sort of here's the main differences between Associate of Science, Associate of Arts, and the Associate of Applied Associate of Science?
Associate of
Applied Science. I always get the 2 A's slipped around. So again, for the AAS, not a lot. You have 2 communication courses. So these would be like the Rhetoric 101 and 102, Speech 101. You need all 3 for these degrees. You need just 2 of them for that degree. And then 1 math or science course, 2 courses out of Fine Arts, Humanities, and Visual Science. But these, it's a little different. This is something that changed just a few years ago. This is probably why some of you have had to work on this, where only 1 course in mathematics for the arts, 2 for the science, 2 classes in science versus 3 classes in science, and then we have a difference here where there's 1 humanity, 1 fine arts versus 3 combined, 3 courses from social behaviors versus 2 courses. So Again, that GECC credential that students can get is pretty much the same as this AA one here. So this is something that has to be there. Again, we don't really have a choice about it. This is part of sort of Illinois curriculum. But I don't know, having it like this is a good way to, when you're going through making sure, when you're creating a curriculum, you're editing a curriculum, if you're changing courses, you still have all of these met, right? You don't want to make sure students aren't missing out on a gen ed. They're sort of in trouble when they go to transfer or get, just trying to graduate. This is one of the things that we've done to try and make it as easier. So the new program maps. So right now in the catalog, if you look at any degree program, it's going to have like the name of the class and the number of credits. And that's sort of it. It just has that sort of listed out. A lot of them semester by semester. Some of them just pick from this list. What's going to be different on the newest maps, on the newest catalog, is that there's this category. It's going to say this class is counting towards this requirement. This class is counting towards this requirement. Whether it's a gen ed or a core course or program elective, the things I'm going to show you next. That's sort of one of the new updates. That should make it easier for us as faculty to figure out, okay, what to swap in and out of if we're trying to update things. And for the student to know, okay, well, I can't get into this class this semester for whatever reason, so what could I replace it with that would still count towards my degree, instead of having to add on an extra few classes. Yeah, I think that's probably good there. Okay, so we have gen eds. For these, for the degree programs, we have to have a certain number of gen eds. We then have the next group of courses, and this is a new terminology we haven't used on the curriculum before, but this is going to be on all the new course maps. And again, that's the thing too. They used to just be like the course outline or the curriculum outlines. Now it's a map, but that is different than a curriculum map, which is assessment. We can get into that later, but we have these core courses. Core courses are courses that you specifically call out and say a student should be taking this, right? So in the physics degree, right? If there's a certain physics course, they really should be taking this semester too, even if it's not necessarily a gen ed, which a lot of these, the first couple of classes in chem and physics and stuff might be, but or whatever field is, maybe yes, a sociology major is going to need social 101, but what's the next sociology course that they should probably get? That would be a core course. So it's something that students, it's recommended they take it. In the AAS degrees, these are actually sort of required courses. They have to take them in order to get that degree. But it's one that you sort of say, okay, in semester 2, take this class, or in semester 3, take this class. That's a core course. Now with an advisor, right, or with the transfer center, students could flip it out with something else, especially if they know, okay, well, I'm going to UIC, and they do it differently than the rest of the state. We'll move around those core courses, but in terms of the guide, in terms of what we should put in there for this initial map, we want to make it something, if it really is sort of consistent across the board for the most part, that's when it's worth putting it as a core course. So again, you want to have some sort of justification. Like you did your research and the top 3 transfer schools all required this course or something like that. Or it's a prereq for something else. Okay, so if it's not a core course, the next category is a program elective. So again, we use this word elective, has been around forever. So we really try to make sure this is now clear between like a core course, a program elective, and then what we see next time is an elective. A program elective, the student has a choice of what to sort of take that, in that slot, that semester. But you give them a list of classes they should take from. So, there's a slot in semester 3 and it says program elective. Down at the bottom of the map, here's a list of 5 program electives. Take one of these, in that slot. So these are courses where, especially if you have degree programs where, like again, in like sociology, there's sort of different routes you can go down. There's more a research track and there's more of like a sort of clinical track. Same with psych. You could have like your program elective sort of guide students that way, or say, okay, take one from this side of sociology, one from this side. In the pre-professional degrees, like the pre-medicine, pre-dentistry, it might be, okay, if you're going more this route, take this set of program electives. Or, depending which school you're going to, you might need these ones. So it's, again, where there's flexibility, there's more choice. It doesn't have to be this particular class, but it should be one from this list of courses. And you should have enough. So this is one thing. If, let's say, you have 3 slots over the course of the 4 semesters, that say program elective, there should be at least 3 program electives, or probably more than 3, because if there was just 3, then you could just go ahead and put them into those semesters and then just make it all 4 courses. So there should be more options for the student than there are electives. Otherwise, again, just make it easy on them and don't make them have to fill that in. And then the last type of class isn't something you're going to see very often. We just redid all the curriculum across campus, 150 programs. This came up very infrequently, mostly with a couple of the arts degrees where, not the fine arts, those actually are really, there's barely any room, but some of the other associate arts degrees where there is a bit more flexibility. So they get in all the core courses, they have some program elective slots, and then there's just a couple extra 3 or 4 credits here and there each semester where it doesn't matter what course they take, they just need to get up to that 60 to get the degree. So an elective is truly like student choice. Like, take a class, you don't have to pick from a list, we're not telling you just take an extra class. Again, I don't think we have it in any of the associate science degrees, and definitely not in any of the AASs. Yeah.
So, we have gen ed courses, so there would be a pool of courses available to the student to pick from.
Yes.
Yep.
Right. And then we would have the core courses. Core course pool would look different for each field. And then we have elective. So maybe the elective would already be part of one of those pools. So if the student picks a gen ed course, to have.
Sure, yeah, and it could be other gens. Now, for the gen eds, that can go either way. You can choose the gen ed for your program, or you can leave it open in the student, because there's a list for physical science courses, there's a list. For life science, there's a list. If you just leave it open, you would basically just say, like, take credits, physical science gen ed, and then they can pick from the list. But if for your particular discipline, especially again in the sciences, it might make sense, like, oh, you should be taking Chem 1 as your physical science gen ed, or you should be taking a Physics 1, that kind of thing. So you can write in what the actual gen ed would be.
The one I can think of in particular is psychology.
Yeah.
Psychology, students can do their GCC and almost complete all of the requirements to get into a psychology program, even at U of I. Most universities don't want students to take more than one additional psychology course, aside from the introduction. And so that would be a perfect example of where you can take an elective that's not related to psychology, but maybe to a minor, right? Like if they want to do a business minor, sociology, that's where this elective category would most likely come in mind. But you're right, it's very few associated in arts degrees. I would say some of the social behavioral sciences, but not all of them are like that.
And that's a really good example of when we did this, we sort of started from scratch for every single program on campus. And there was a bit of that where, again, like a degree might have a bunch of things listed in it, like maybe the old psych degree had a bunch of psych courses listed. However, like Nellie's saying, a lot of times those couldn't transfer. Those majors didn't want to take that as those psych courses. And so, at the university. So you only want to put in stuff that, again, it can sort of be justified through your research and through transfer agreements, through things like that. Because you don't want to tell the student, oh, look, you're going to take all these great classes and you're going to be ready, and then that school's going to be like, wait, we'll take your Psych 101, but nothing else. And there's good examples of that in science as well.
Yeah.
There's only certain levels of, like physics, I can think of an example, like they're not going to, USC wants to teach its physics courses. There's some stuff they'll let us teach, but some stuff they might not. So you want to not sort of promise those things to students by putting them on the map if they're not really going to count.
Yeah, because you have to think the GCC core is completed after between 37 to 41 hours. So what are the other 20 hours going to be? If they're not a program elective and they're an elective, it has to be, again, very intentional, right? And for some students, like some faculty even brought up, what about having a certificate? Sure, that would be a great opportunity to do a certificate in there. But if it can flow with, the curriculum, students can go for that. So some of the resources, I know it's kind of hard to see here. They are supposed to be hyperlinked. Give me a minute. Some of the resources, and you should be getting this presentation at the end, that we used when we were doing a lot of this vetting with our faculty. We have the GCC now on the website, the General Education course, so you can see all of the courses that students can choose from. And they're all listed on there.
This is a good example of what the new curriculum looks like with the categories in there.
Yeah.
Sort of. I guess it'll be.
Yeah. So that's one way to use that resource. We also have the transfer guides on the transfer website, which are under Students, Transfer Center, and you'll see them here. This is the Transfer Center site, but on the top left corner, you'll see Partnerships and Transfer Guides, and that's where they are all listed. Under Partnerships, we have the 2+2 agreements, which are also transfer guides. They're there instead of under Transfer Center, because under transfer guides, because it would just be very messy. There's just so many. But they're all there. So when faculty ask, you know, what can I go off of, I'm happy to send that list. If you reach out to me, I'll give you all of the partnerships. We have a big database where we're constantly updating, you know, where there are majors for every institution. If you want to put it on your landing page as a resource for students, that would be great too. But we use these a lot, again, with the vetting, because we wanted to make sure that whatever we were doing, we had a justification for it. And we also did it based on our top transfer destinations, which we have that data through the National Student Clearinghouse and our research team here, who does a great job at updating that report. Oh, I just did the partnerships, I'm sorry. And Transferology, of course. So Transferology, as faculty, you actually have access to Transferology Lab, which is a little different, and I would say I like it better than the regular Transferology. One of the things that is great about it is you can run degree audits, you can do course bundles to see how all of the courses that you teach transfer to other universities. And so that's another way that I help faculty. If they say, hey, I need to know, like, I'm creating a certificate, which courses will transfer? I'll create a course bundle for them and show them how I've done it so that they can see for themselves. But if you want access to this, let me know, and I can get you access to the lab. And you can also get training through Dina Lawrence, who runs the Transferology in the state of Illinois. It's through a grant that makes it free for everyone. I don't know what I just did. Sorry. Okay. And then the Associate in Arts, Associate in Science, the Associate in Applied Science degrees, those are all on our website. Should I click on one so you can